Well, hello, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about creating effective outdoor spaces. So, without any further ado, let's just get going. So, first thing, who am I? My name is Greg Nelson, and I'm a researcher at School Outfitters. And I study a couple things. I study the link between the physical environment and educational outcomes. And I also study the link between educational approaches and the physical environment. And so both of those will be germane to our talk today. Basically, what it says is that the physical environment can have a big impact on educational outcomes like student engagement, even student performance. And then there's also a link between the way the physical environment is set up and the educational approaches that teachers choose. So all of this is going to dovetail into our talk today about effective outdoor spaces. Also, I'm a psychology department instructor at St. Clair Community College, and that's in Dayton, Ohio. I teach a lot of things, but possibly most interesting for our talk today is I teach lifespan development, where I talk about child development and how children develop through their milestones. Of course, my contact information is below. Okay, so presentation topics. And first of all, let me say that I really wish I could be there live, but family circumstances warrant that I should do a video. But please, as you think of questions, put them in the Q&A because I would love to see what questions you have, and I'll go through them after the talk. So I encourage you to do that. I also put up several topics in the discussion posts, so feel free to put those in there as well. So really, when I think about this, I think of, three things. Why repurpose outdoor spaces? And I'll talk a little bit about that. Then we'll talk about what kind of spaces you can create. And so really, when we talk about that, we say, well, let's look at some layouts and let's see why we chose those layouts with those kind of products. And then how do I start? So you might be in a position where you say, well, I can get one or two things for my outdoor space. And others of you might be in a space where you say, look, I really want to go full out and create this outdoor space from scratch. So I can help with all of that, and we'll get to that too. Okay, so the first thing, why repurpose outdoor spaces? And so I really want to talk about this. There's an immediate term thing, which is really COVID related, and then there are some long-term benefits that just are a good idea for having people learn outside. So the first, why repurpose outdoor spaces? So let's talk about those immediate COVID concerns. There are really two. Health and safety. And that's what we've been talking about. We've been talking about health and safety a lot because we talk about, well, how do we achieve good social distancing, and how do we create good sanitation, and how do we make sure that we keep people safe. And that's a very important concern, and that was the immediate concern. When we started this whole thing in March about how to keep people safe. But the second thing is psychological well-being, and that's something that we are seeing as being a big issue, especially now because people are dealing with feelings like isolation. There's some feelings of depression, either mild or moderate, in some cases severe, because of being away from people, not getting out and not collaborating with friends or that kind of thing. So that's one reason to repurpose your outdoor spaces. And I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about promoting physical health. So let's talk about this. So outdoor experiences do promote physical health. First of all, let's talk about natural air. So natural air is great. The circulation lets the respiratory particles dissipate. And really, when we talk about the breadth of being outdoors, that when you breathe into the air, you have the vastness of all the air and wind cycles. And so basically, your respiratory particles have a better chance of dissipating out into the air and not staying in a person's immediate sphere. The The wide expanse of outdoors promotes distancing. Yeah, well, let's think about this. So if you're in a classroom, your distancing is confined by the walls within that classroom. And now you might have also a relatively confined outdoor space, but in general, the outdoors lends itself to better distancing. Natural airflow raises oxygen levels. That's true, right? So you have all of this oxygen outside, and you can just absorb it and suck it all up. And now, if you partner that with the amount of movement you can do outside, gross motor movement, you can take in a lot of oxygen. And oxygen is great for all aspects of your physical health, but including your cognitive health as well. So, if you want to stay sharp for cognitive tests, natural airflow is very, very important. Outside, you can have freer movement. So, in that, having freer movement promotes cardiovascular health. And so let's think about outside. When you're inside and you sit in a chair, that's great and everything. But when you sit in a chair, basically, you have only a few postures you can take. Whereas if you're outside, you can sit on the floor. You can sit on the floor inside too, but you can sit in the grass. You can lean up against a tree. There are all sorts of different things that lend affordances to different seating postures. And what that does is that allows you to use different muscles. Your ways of stretching and moving and balancing outside all promotes cardiovascular health. Not to mention just if you can express yourself freely with gross motor movements, that promotes good cardiovascular health. And lastly, let's talk about sunlight. Sunlight is very, very important. I know that I need to go outside because sunlight stimulates vitamin D production. And what does that do? That does a whole bunch of things, but mostly it helps to boost the immune system quite a bit. And, when we talk about keeping people healthy, one of the things that we want to look at is boosting their immune system. And it's also linked to, better bone health, better insulin regulation. So there's a lot about sunlight. You absorb, I always say, I'm a photoreceptive being. I absorb the light and I make great things out of it. Yeah, your body makes great chemicals and does great things for its physical health when you have sunlight. Now let's go and talk about psychological well-being. When we talk about psychological well-being, there are a few things that being outside helps with. Number one, and what we're talking about, especially with regard to COVID, is that being with other children reduces the stresses of being isolated. So even if you're at a distance, you can still be with other children, and that helps us to really be healthy socially. I mean, human beings are social animals. We're social creatures. We need to be around other people. That's a very important thing for us. So also, when you're in the same space, even if you're separated by distance, you kind of have a communal experience. You're all in the same outdoor place at the same time, and that shared experience is important for combating feelings of isolation. Nextly, and this is huge, I bring this up a lot in my psychology classes about serotonin, but connecting with nature is associated with increases in the production of serotonin. And what that is, that's a mood elevator. So, if you have too little serotonin, it's associated with depression. Whereas if you have normal levels of serotonin, you tend to feel good. You tend to emotionally feel good. Connecting with nature it has been found to increase your body's natural serotonin production. And then multisensory stimulation. Yeah, think about this. So you're outside and you've got so much going on. You've got the sounds, and let's think about sound, right? So when you're inside a classroom, your hearing is confined to whatever's in that classroom. But when you are outside, you might hear a jet in the air, like 20,000 feet in the air. And you're echolocating where that jet is. You're also echolocating the sound of a bird in a tree, and you're echolocating the sound of your feet crunching on the grass. I mean, think about all of that stimulation that's happening just auditorily. And then visually, your eyes are accommodating to things far away You might look at a bird far away or a balloon floating up in the sky. You might be looking at something very close up, but your eyes are constantly accommodating to different things at different distances. And so you're also feeling the feel of wind on your skin. You're feeling the feel of grass on your hands. There are all sorts of things that you're feeling. And what happens sensorily is you're getting a really a good hodgepodge of sensory experiences. And what that does is it increases activity all along different parts of the brain. And that increase in activity can lead to very positive emotional states. So when we talk about the benefits of being outside, there is a lot that promotes the psychological well-being. So now I'm getting away from like the COVID specific health and safety pieces and the psychological well-being pieces, and of course all of this kind of coincides, but there are also some very long-term benefits of outdoor learning. Even if we weren't in a COVID situation, what are some of the benefits? One is that young learners become firsthand witnesses to natural processes. And I want to really stress this because this is really the first step to becoming a natural scientist. What happens is that you are seeing things happen. Let's just think about if you see through your entire school year, you see a plant grow from being a seedling to a sprout to a blossoming flower, and then you watch it wither. What you're watching is you're watching a natural cycle happen. And so you are firsthand witness to natural processes, and you become a person who directly observes that. And really, that is the first step to STEM kind of thinking, to directly observe and make hypotheses and predictions. You can also manipulate the environment to see what happens. So not only can you observe things that are happening naturally, that you can also manipulate nature. So like, for instance, very rarely can you dig under your carpet, but all the time you can dig into the dirt, right? So you dig into the dirt and what's underneath that? Well, you can see, all sorts of potato bugs or worms or, whatever else is in the dirt. You can see like real root systems. You can look at the grass and you can like pull up a clump of dirt and you can say, oh, look at that. Look at the root systems underneath there. So when you manipulate the environment, your manipulation, your action has an effect on the things you can observe. And all of this is a wonderful first step to STEM related learning, which we know is going to be an important part of 21st century education is STEM learning. Outdoor observations promote active learning where children find out information for themselves. And that is cool, right? Because the learning isn't necessarily prescribed for them. Like for instance, typically when you use things that are created like an abacus or something else, and those are great things. Don't get me wrong, but their uses are kind of already prescribed for you. Now in nature, you can kind of be the master of your own active learning. So you go seek something, you find something, and what you seek and find outside might be entirely different from what other people seek and find outside. So you really have ownership on the things that you learn about. And lastly, natural observations are unfiltered. They're free from summaries on digital print media. And again, digital print media summaries are great. I don't want to take anything away from that. But there's something cool about not having that filter. So instead, you're seeing the thing as it is. You're not seeing what somebody else superimposes on it. Now, if you want to learn more about it, you can go back to your digital media and find out more about this kind of flower that you saw, or this kind of butterfly that you saw, or how to make better sandcastles, or whatever it is you're naturally observing and manipulating in a very unfiltered sort of environment. You're really finding out this stuff for yourself. And all of this creativity, and I'm calling it creativity, not in the sense like artists, although art can be a part of it. I'm talking about creating your thoughts, structuring your own educational experience. Those are some of the very long-term benefits of outdoor learning. And I want to bring up an example of this. I want to bring up Finland. Finland is a great example. outdoor, the impact of outdoor learning. They have a strong focus on outdoor play, especially in early years, early education. 90 minutes of outdoor play per day in preschool. And the interesting thing is no mandated standardized tests. So fascinating, right? They're not a group, they're not a country who drills their students on standardized testing. And yet, when we look at the PISA results, PISA is a standardized test that's given throughout the world, and they've ranked countries on how well they do on this test. Finland is 4th in the world in reading. 4th in the world. US is 24th. They're 5th in the world in science, where the US is 25th. And 13th in the world in math, where the US is 41st. Now I'm bringing this up because it's a great example of, this isn't like a group that constantly drills its standardized testing, but what they do have is a very strong commitment to outdoor play. And what's even more interesting about Finland is that, they have very cold seasons. So it's not like we're finding the optimum place to go outside. There are sometimes it's very, very cold. So even though sometimes there are less hospitable conditions, there's still a strong focus on outdoor play. And so I'm sure some of the time Finland is very lovely, but other times it can be very, very cold. So it kind of suggests that you don't need to necessarily wait for the optimum time to go outside to get the benefits of going outside. One more really quickly. Boston did this schoolyard initiative where they revitalized 88 playgrounds, 32 outdoor classrooms, and it impacted 30,000 Boston school children with 100 new garden beds, 200 new trees, new play equipment, outdoor furnishings. And what did that result in? What happened when they looked at Boston kids with these revitalized playgrounds versus Boston public school kids without those revitalized playgrounds? Here's what they saw. Higher standardized math exam scores. So standardized math exam scores, the people with the revitalized playgrounds scored better on those tests. And also reduced suspensions and improved attendance. So here we have an example of a group that they improved their, they didn't have as much in the way of behavioral issues, and people were more motivated to come to school. So there are all sorts of wonderful and academic performance, in terms of academic performance and in terms of other measures of engagement, improvements that occurred in conjunction with helping out their outdoor spaces. Okay, so the question is, what kind of outdoor spaces can I create? So I want to spend the bulk of my time talking about this. First, let's talk about planning. So when we talk about planning, first thing is consider what you want to do. So do you want to take your indoor light conditions and do them outside, or do you want to do something more specific to outdoors? Like for instance, you say, well, I want to have all my stations that I typically have indoors, but I want to move those outdoors. You can do that. But you can also use your outdoor space as a special place where you say, well, I want this outdoor space to be an outdoor STEM exploration area. I want for my children to understand how to observe things in nature, and I really want this to be a nature focused sort of space. You can do that too, and you can do hybrids. And then you want to consider your space. So a few considerations I put out here, but there are a number of them, right? Including how much space do you have? Also, what kind of facilities do you have? So are you going to be near a place where children can go to the restroom or get water, get their medications, this kind of thing? Or do you need to wheel some of that stuff outdoors? There are outdoor hand washing stations, and there are indoor outdoor carts that can wheel in and out medications and that kind of thing. What kind of permissions do you need? Can you put permanent structures in, or do you have to keep temporary structures that you might have to move? These are some considerations. Others are, considering your outdoor surroundings. Do you already have access to things so you don't have to buy them? Like for instance, do you have access to shade? Do you have access to trees, walls, that kind of thing that can give you shade throughout the day? Are there areas that you need to restrict, and do you have good fencing? Like, do you live or do you hold your classes near a street, and then do you have the proper fencing so that you can keep your children out of harm's way, and you can also observe them well in your space? So here, these are some planning considerations for your outdoor spaces. And now I'd like to go and talk about a few kinds of outdoor spaces and talk about some advantages that each kind of space has. So first, let's talk about outdoor stations. Now here we have a set of outdoor stations where picnic tables are your activity areas. And that's part of the convenience, right? So you have these multifunction kinds of pieces like picnic tables that can serve as both activity stations, and they perform the double duty as being eating areas as well. And that might help you, especially if you're on a budget, to think about, well, how can I do some multifunction kinds of furnishings? And I'll talk about those when I talk about products. Health. So make sure you have good spacing. Well-spaced tables let individuals or small groups safely rotate to different activities. So yeah, so you want to make sure that things are well-spaced, so you can keep consistent groups, and those consistent groups can rotate from section to section. I put some small seating units in the center. Now this can be all sorts of different kind of stools or what have you, but if you can have those, you can move like your instructors and your assistants wherever they need, and they can take a seat as well. We did talk about the traffic flows already. Monitoring. So now if you look at this layout, we've created this layout so that it's very easy for caregivers to monitor. So you see that the tables are centralized and they're all in one space, and they're low tables, so it should be easy for caregivers to see all that's going on. Sanitation. Really want to talk about two things: waste baskets and sanitation stations. So keeping those around the perimeter of this space is helpful, because what you can do is you can have a certain section assigned to a certain waste receptacle, and then another section assigned to another waste receptacle. You can do the same thing with sanitizer stations. They're not pictured here, but you could set up sanitizer stations at either end so that different sections are assigned to those places. It reduces the amount of traffic flow for somebody having to come from all the way from one area to another just to sanitize hands. I want to talk about green space. So in this particular outdoor station, there's some green space, and in this case, there are some garden beds. And in these garden beds, this helps children to kind of connect with nature, but also teaches about growing cycles and that kind of thing. There's also a great thing about plants. Plants, increase oxygenation. You breathe out carbon dioxide, the plant takes it in. The plant gives back oxygen. So it kind of also helps with oxygenation. And then communication. So basically, you see an outdoor board here. In this case, it's a tack board, but you can also have a writable board that you can use to facilitate teaching or whatever other communication you have. You can also opt to have magnetic surfaces, so that you can kind of maybe with a card or a bin, you could bring out your magnetic letters or whatever magnetic tools that you have to work with the children through anything, literacy or pattern recognition or anything like that. So this is the outdoor station, and this is one of those where you say, well, I want to take much of my indoor stuff and bring it outdoors. This is a great way of doing it. You can also make it your own outdoor space. So this has a lot of possibilities. Now let's talk about something that's a little more specific to outdoor activities. If you say, well, I want this to be an outdoor STEM exploration space. Well, these are the kind of furnishings that would lend themselves to something like that. And what are some of the properties of those furnishings that lend themselves to it? Well, number one, the tables here have container areas. And so either they accept containers, like for instance, you see in these that the containers kind of sink into the table. Here, this is sized so that the bins could sit on the table. And here you have a raised lip around the entirety of the table. And basically, when you have tables that kind of have a container space, you can then kind of have a little more flexibility in the types of materials you can put there. So if you put sand in there, you can put it in there and it'll stay contained. If you put dirt in there, it can stay contained. You know, so if you were to take, say, this table with a lip on it, and you were to like see how like a stone rolls across the table, you don't have to lose it in the grass. It can stay on the table for the most part. These also serve a lot of different functions. Like with the bins, you can go out and get stuff from other parts of the outdoor space, bring it back, and you can dig into the dirt, dig into the sand. You can put water in it and submerge things into the bins. So there's a lot you can do with these kinds of things. But containers very much help. And then let's talk about access. So shelving below and above in this table, for instance, that you see here, they help to provide immediate access to stored materials. So let's say you're working on something and you want to have your tools and materials underneath. Well, that's great. Then all you need to do is bring the materials up and you can start working with it right away. So something else to think about is, well, how am I going to display and how am I going to shelve things? Well, in this case, the upper level is a display, and it might be an experiment where you say, well, this plant got the composted material and this plant did not. Or, you know, or this might be a plant that was watered 3 times a day, you know, 1 time a day, once every 2 days, and once a week, you know, or something like that. There are things that you can do, still science experiments you can do, and you might be able to display them on the shelving. Let's talk about health. So separated pods creates spacious workways, and you see there's a lot of separation between these among these pods, and you know, you want to rotate consistent groups in and out of these activity areas. Variety. So here we have a variety of things. There's this table with the lip. We have these tables that don't sink in. We have these tables that do have bins that sink in. And we have this, for lack of a better word, a workbench type place. So basically you can have children choose the activity they want to do, or you can rotate, again, the idea of consistent groupings, you can rotate them among a variety of things. So they have the opportunity to sit, they have the opportunity to stand, the opportunity to work the way they need to work. Give children more ownership of their experience. I'm going to talk a little bit about immersion, and basically immersion, I'm going to talk about biophilia, biophilic design. And biophilic design really is the love of nature. Biophilic design is kind of a $5 word for saying, does this mimic nature? Does this harken back to nature? And so in this case, these are all natural wood products. And so, you know, if you get wood that weathers well, like cedar wood, that kind of thing, that weathers the elements well, you can kind of create safe spaces that are durable, but also kind of reinforce natural play. So just like being on these natural surfaces, you might say, well, hey, I'm in nature now, and I'm working with nature now. And then personalization. So we have these stools that are portable, and children can go where they need. That personalization can also lend to ownership. And then lastly, I want to talk about gross motor opportunities. So, you know, you're outside, you want to move around, right? So things like bridges, beams, steppers, all these things work on balance and coordination. They can also give children time kind of away from like the fine observations over here, and let them kind of, you know, get the wiggles out, or kind of get their energies going. Okay, let's talk about outdoor developmental play areas. And really, when I talk about this, I really want to make a note that, you know, when you need to put several developmental items in a small space, having a variety is a good thing. So, you know, when we talk about this, let's talk about engagement. There are things like art panels, literacy panels, and I really like this because what this does is this allows children to be engaged while using their whole body. So like, for instance, if you look at this sign language panel, you're standing there and you're doing all of the, A and E and that kind of thing. And you can stand in front of it and you can even put up your hand. If you're doing E, you can put it up next to the thing and see that you've got it right. I really like the amount of engagement that panels allow. Again, with gross motor objects like steppers, balance beams, this kind of thing, a great way to develop strength and coordination. Also to develop, their perceptual development, because as you gain balance and learn what you can do, your senses have to adapt as well. So sensory motor coordination is big with gross motor stuff. STEM. So let's talk about this. So if you have the opportunity to put STEM stuff in there, things like waterways and sand tables, they teach everyday physics by showing how objects flow through channels. Like for instance, let's take this waterway. It has dams that you can raise or lower. You can see what happens to the water. You can see what happens to objects as you float one object up, you open up the dam, it lowers the water down. It can sail through. You can kind of show the way objects move, and it's a fundamental kind of set of lessons for physics. You can do the same thing with sand tables as it goes through those funnels that spin the wheels. All the while you're learning things about the physical world. And then imagination. Like dramatic play structures, like playhouses. They promote creative role play, yes, but they also contribute to health as well sometimes, because you can provide canopies with items with roofs, and they can provide shade for the sun. And so, those are good objects to have to kind of provide some respite from the sunlight. Okay, let's talk about playgrounds. So if you have a playground and you want to incorporate some more specific learning items, you can certainly do that. Playgrounds obviously are a gross motor place, right? So play sets, climbers, tunnels, all those things, they promote great cardiovascular health, and they're good for kids. It's good for people to move around and use their bodies. And so that gives you good blood flow, good oxygen, all of that. I want to talk a bit about inclusion, and if you turn your attention to the bottom corner here, you see this handle with a bar. And the nice thing about a handle with a bar is, it promotes children who need that extra help in kind of rising up to a stand, or kind of holding on to get a little more balance. But the more we can include things with handles and things that help students of all kinds, you promote more inclusion on your playgrounds. Talk about variety. So yeah, we want to stimulate a wide range of interests. And so I'm going to talk through a few of these. We talked about STEM a little bit when we talked about the developmental play area. But basically, if you can incorporate those, it helps a lot to have a fun way of learning about the physical world. Art. Panels let children use their whole bodies as they create drawings. So now you're out, your blood's flowing, and you can use these washable surfaces to draw, paint, write, facilitating all kinds of communication and creative skills. Music. Yeah, so we have things like outdoor drums, outdoor xylophones, whistles, hand-operated whistles. They all help with musicality. Even if you're just messing around, even if you're just having fun with it, you can work on musicality and just playing around with musical skills. It's also fun to bang on these instruments. And then health. Again, playhouses provide shade. And also, as we talked about, opportunities for creative and dramatic play. You can incorporate some of the outdoor stuff indoors. I've seen a number of occasions where people have put dirt in a cup and pretended it was a sundae, and they're selling sundaes at their ice cream shop or that kind of thing. And interpersonal skills. So you see there's a picnic table here. If you have seating areas, it lets children rest. And it also lets people engage in conversation, and instructors can help with the social emotional learning aspect also while people develop their interpersonal skills. And lastly, I want to talk about the last rendering I want to give you is this outdoor reading and demonstration area. So if you want to gather people around, this is a good way of doing it. But basically, I want to talk about a few attributes of it. First of all, when we talk about focus, what we did is we put these backless benches in, and basically what we want is for children to choose how they sit. See, these two children pictured here sitting quite properly, but other children might, put their legs to the side, they might rock a little bit or fidget or whatever they need to do in order to pay better attention to the instructor. And so I tend to like these backless bench designs to allow a little more flexibility there. Also, small benches are easy to move around. So these are relatively small benches. They're relatively easy for an instructor to move, and they help to create the space that you need. So whether you need more space or less space, that's very helpful. Also, this is where I imagine an instructor might sit, just like this situation is here. And so what would happen is the instructor could sit on this stool and demonstrate something. And then these low tables, they let the teachers access things very easily, but they also let students come up after the demonstration and figure it out for themselves. And then movement. The portable stools let teachers move where they're most needed. And again, we talk about biophilic design. Now, you can choose, you don't have to choose biophilic design, but you can. That might be another way that you reinforce learning in nature. And again, biophilic design really means selecting natural materials that kind of reinforce the idea that you're doing some outside stuff. All right, so let's go on how do I start? So let's talk about making initial choices. So when you make initial choices, let's start with a philosophy. A philosophy is any outdoor place can be a learning place. So so if you think like that, then really when you think about what to buy, what to bring into this outdoor space, you can kind of keep in mind that the children are pretty flexible. They can sit and stand and squat easily on many surfaces. So you have a lot of opportunities here, not only for bought things, but just to sit in the grass and that kind of thing. So you want to start with essential furnishing. So if I were to say, okay, what's the one thing you need? You need stuff for health and safety. You need to make sure that children have adequate access to shade, and you need to make sure that children have the medications they might need. You might need, some children might need inhalers, some children might need other medications that might react to bee stings or something like that, first aid equipment, that kind of thing. So then find opportunities to transport indoor equipment outside. So you can do double duty, right? You can find stuff that's going to be good for both your indoor space and your outdoor space. Then you could find furnishings and equipment that can serve many purposes. We talked about picnic tables being one of those. That's an eating surface as well as an activity area, but there are others. And then incorporate items specifically for outdoor use. So if you really say, look, I want this to be a dedicated outdoor space just for outdoor learning, well, great. We can do that. Like garden beds are a good example, but I'll show you some examples of products. So let's talk about the essentials first. Let's talk about health, safety, and storage. So let's talk about, you need quick access to medicines, first aid. And one of the ways of doing it is to get a mobile cart. Now, mobile carts come in a couple of varieties, right? You have the typical indoor carts, which are laminates. Then you have the more rugged outdoor carts. And I'll talk about that a little later for indoor-outdoor equipment. But this mobile cart you see is a laminate unit. And so it's good because you want to be able to move stuff in and out. But you want to make sure that if you have a laminate unit that you use mostly inside, that you don't give it a lot of outdoor exposure because it's not made for that. More things like heavy duty solid plastic is made for outdoor exposure. But at any rate, you want to have locking casters for safety so you make sure that it doesn't roll. Then you have outdoor cabinets. Basically, you want a consistent location for safety items. If you have certain first aid kits or certain other things, this provides a good consistent location. Sloped roofs, I want to say sloped roofs are really nice with regard to these because they keep water from seeping in to the cabinet and keep your stuff fresh. So you want to, that's something to look for. Um, in all cases, and by the way, this is going to be in a handout. So while I won't go through everything, I give you always things to look for. You want to look for locking drawers and cabinets. You want to look for wide bases so they don't tip. Multiple shelves are very, very helpful. And then if you can incorporate bins, that kind of hastens the transfer of things. It makes it easier to access and to put away things. And then, of course, cleanliness with smooth, non-porous surfaces. So let's talk about sun protection. So when we talk about this, there are a couple of things. Playhouses are great. Playhouse is over to the right, and then the canopy, the larger canopy, is to the left. And again, I'm not going to go over all of this, but I want to talk specifically about access points. So when you talk about sun protection, you want people to be able to access them. Something like a canopy like this lets children access from really any angle. And the Playhouse is also great, and it has a front and a back access, you just want to make sure that you have good access points. And then ventilation, of course. There are plenty of windows here to allow air to circulate through, and there's a very open space to let air circulate through. And don't forget, you also have other sources of sun protection too, right? Like if you have trees or sides of buildings, it should say sides of buildings, not slides of buildings, and then tents or cloth canopies. Okay, so those are the essentials. Now let's talk about indoor-outdoor items. So when I think about that, you have, first of all, tables and seating. And I want to talk about two types. So the first set is you have this multifunction pieces. And these multifunction pieces, they're kind of budget friendly because they're units that flip to make chairs of different heights, or they make tables. So if you flip it one way, it's a chair of one height, flip it another way, it's a chair of another height, flip it another way, and it's tabletop. And that's a really nice option, especially if you're really kind of trying to stay budget conscious. One other thing that tends to be nice about these is they tend to be color coded. And so the color coding could be good because you can have something like, okay, go to the green station, or go to the blue station, or go to the yellow station. Here we have traditional table and chair sets. And what's great about this is that you immediately see this, you know what it is. It's a table and chair set. Whereas here, you'll learn what these are, but it might not be apparent, immediately apparent. Whereas here, these are definitely table and chair areas. So they're very, very recognizable. One other thing I want to talk about with regard to the things to consider is this, let's see, where is it? Stackability, flexibility. Stackable tables can open up the space and store easily. So if you can stack these multifunction pieces on top of each other and move them out of the way, you can create a bigger expanse. You can do the same thing with these tables. You can move them, you can stack them and move them. So when you need to, you can move them out of the way. It's something to look for. There's also, I want to also bring up this idea of UV protectants, that if you have UV protection on your equipment, that's very helpful. I want to talk about two types of portable storage. I want to talk about bins and tubs, and I want to talk about mobile carts. So first, let's talk about bins and tubs first. So basically, this is for the simple transfer of specific things. So you have stuff inside you want to bring outside, or if you just want to store things of a specific type, they're great. Bins and tubs are great for that. I want to talk about a couple things. You can use these for good health. So what you can do is you can have children in the kind of the larger tubs. They can put their personal items in there. You can put a lid on it. And then what that does is that allows the personal items to be in an area, be in a safe, secure area without touching other people's stuff. So it avoids some cross-contamination. I also want to talk about a little bit about when you're choosing tubs, this idea of portability versus capacity. So this idea that, deeper bins are great because they hold more stuff, but they might be more difficult to move around once they're full. So you want to think about, well, how portable do I need these things to be versus, how much do I want it to hold? Now let's talk about mobile carts. I told you I'd talk about this a little bit when I talked about stuff for health and safety, but you can do more than health and safety with mobile carts. There are some that are for indoor and outdoor use. Like this one is made of the heavy duty plastic. And what that does is it weathers the elements well. So you want to think about things like this has a long top surface, and that long top surface allows some things to be done on top of it, or things to be displayed on top of it, and that could be a nice feature. You also want to make sure that you have that children can access them if they're used for getting tools and materials out. Now, if they're used for medications, obviously you need to have a lock on it. But if they're used for getting like digging tools or whatever, having shelves that allow bins is a helpful piece to that, the portable storage. Indoor nature. When we talk about indoor nature, this allows people to continue nature lessons indoors. So like, for instance, if you get flower pots, you can bring them outside, yes, but you can also protect your less hardy plants and bring them inside, like say during cold snaps. You can have, in the cold weather, you can observe growth cycles indoors as well as outdoors. If you have flower pots that you can bring outside. This is a product called Indoor Composter, and it lets people see how materials break down firsthand. You can run experiments, like there's a styrofoam piece in here that's not going to break down in their lifetime, but there are also pieces in here like banana peels, which will break down, and you can see it. You can see the differences in the way different materials compost. Things to consider. So really, you can do lots of things. You can talk about portability versus capacity. Small containers carry more easily. And you can also use them for personalization. You can have like a flower pot that belongs to a certain team or a certain group that they can use and nurture. And then sensory items. So you can have sensory tables that can move from indoors to outdoors if you want to keep a consistent sensory experience. So one of the things you have to think about, again, is that trade-off between how much will it hold and how easily is it to move around. So smaller, deeper sand tables, for instance, might be a good idea, because it allows you to do all the digging and all the stuff that you would do with a sand table, but also be portable enough that a couple of assistants could move it outside. One thing I want to talk about is cleanup. When we talk about cleanup, you want to think about, well, how am I going to, I want to make sure that I can clean up all the stuff. So you can think of tarps underneath or lids and covers that can help you to move things in and out and to clean up. All right, multi-purpose items. Let's talk quickly about multi-purpose items. We talked about picnic tables when we talked about outdoor stations, and this could be a great budget-friendly solution. And all these are aimed at being budget-friendly because they serve two purposes, right? So when we talk about picnic tables, let's think about things like reach. There's a bullet point here for reach. And you want to have widths that promote participation. In the age of COVID, you also want to think about health. So you want to think about staggered seating, right? So you want to think about, like in this picture, the students are facing each other. In COVID situation, you might want to have one student over on one side and the other student on a diagonal on the other side. And what that does is that kind of allows, it gives a better chance of fewer respiratory particles being exchanged. Art panel dividers. I really like these. These are multifunction pieces that exist outside, but they do two purposes. The dividers section off different groups. So it's easier to separate groups and have them in their own areas. But the art panel dividers also serve double duty as being communication devices and creative devices. So you can use them, especially magnetic surfaces. You can post magnets on them. You can use paintable surfaces to paint or write or whatever you want to do with them. So art panel dividers are a good multifunction item. And again, this is going to be in a handout, so you can look more closely at the things to consider in that handout. Tables with shelves. We talked about that a little bit also when we talked about the outdoor STEM exploration area. So consider multi-purpose shelving as being multi-purpose kind of thing. So if your shelving can also double as your activity surface, that is a win-win, and that could save you some storage space, as well as kind of save you your budget, and you can have your stuff immediately available, so the children can work with it right there. And now let's talk about specific items for outdoor use. We talked a little bit about the tables, right? So we have these outdoor tables with containers. I already talked about this, but I just wanted to kind of bring up that these are some specific things that are constructed for outdoor tasks. Again, consider reach. How many children are going to be working on this, and how are they going to play together? Outdoor activity equipment. Some activities are easier to do outside. Like for instance, some balance beams that kind of are more expansive. Those might be better outside. Some water flow play, that might be better outside. Of course, things like sandboxes tend to be better outside. Garden areas where we have raised garden beds, a more permanent kind of thing, can help students see natural growth cycles outside. And then outdoor hygiene equipment, I do want to talk about that. These are more rugged versions of things you would otherwise see indoors. So we see sanitizer stations, waste receptacles, the hand washing stations. And the neat thing about this is that it has a foot pump action that allows you to push the water through the foot pump, and so you don't really have to have an electrical outlet. There's a tank, and then it hooks up to the foot pump action, and then you can pump the water that way. And dramatic play items. So there are items that should inspire pretend play outdoors. And so things like mud kitchens, this idea of a farmer's market, things that people love to do this. My own children love to play ice cream stand when they go to their playgrounds. So some dramatic play items can be helpful for using the things they find outdoors and making pretend play out of all of that. Outdoor instruments, we talked a little bit about when we talked about the playgrounds, but really anything that children can do to explore rhythm, to explore pitch, to explore how music is made, how it all works. It kind of stimulates their mind to kind of, they're reacting kinesthetically. They're doing something kinesthetically, but then they're also absorbing that auditorily, and this multi-function sort of appreciation for music is something that can be done outside pretty easily. Okay, so I really just wanted to give you kind of a quick survey of how you might want to think about constructing outdoor areas. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your interest in this. And like I said, please post questions to the Q&A section. Also, I have some discussion posts that I have put some questions on. I would love to see you contribute to those discussion posts to see what you think about your outdoor areas. My contact information is right here, Greg Nelson, greg.nelson at schooloutfitters.com. And so please feel free to contact me with anything. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. And enjoy making your own outdoor adventures. Bye now.